All right, we're collaborating for impact, and we'd like to yield the floor to you now, Kandeh Yumkella, who is the chairman of the Presidential Initiative on Climate Change, Renewable Energy and Food Security in Sierra Leone.
Good morning, Your Excellency, President of OPEC Fund, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to be here to share a few ideas with you. It feels like coming back home. I've collaborated with OPEC Fund for over 2 decades. It was in the Hofburg, in collaboration with OPEC Fund and others, that we forged the development of Sustainable Development Goal number 7. It was in here almost 20 years ago that we did that work together with OPEC Fund and others after a major conference in Saudi Arabia on energy poverty. I also feel honored to be here because as Director General of UNIDO for 2 terms, I also led the effort for developing Sustainable Development Goal number 9, which reads, building resilient infrastructure, promoting sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. So I feel honored that I'm here again together with OPEC Fund in this innovative forum. It is also here back in 2007, 2008 that we started another forum, which still exists today. The last time they did it last November, they had about 1,500 participants in the room, in the big hall, and also about 2,000 online. So here we have another innovation from OPEC Fund. I'm very pleased, Your Excellency, that you're always innovating, finding the right platforms, using your convening power to bring people together to dialogue and collaborate on emerging challenges around the world. In the DNA of OPEC Fund, and of course, one of the themes of our discussion is about South-South cooperation. Mahathir Mohamad, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, used to say back then, 25, 30 years ago, when we were doing conferences, I was 20 years in the UN, when we were doing conferences in Malaysia, he said, you remember, prosper thy neighbor. If you have a peaceful neighbor, a prosperous neighbor, you will be at peace. And I think that's the spirit of South-South cooperation. Sometimes the answers, the solutions we're looking for are really next door. Your neighbor would have done something right. Somebody else in the global South would have done something right. And indeed, with the staff and the whole institution of OPEC Fund, it is core of their DNA to push for South-South cooperation. Let me share a few ideas with you. Indeed, you've heard of the global crisis in which we live, multiple crises, which is creating a trust deficit. I was in the global governance system for over 20 years, in various multilateral institutions, leading UN agency myself, together with Ban Ki-moon. But we worry now about the growing mistrust. That's why these kinds of forums, smaller forums to allow this interaction is crucial. But we need a world that is truly committed to equity, to inclusiveness. Equity and inclusiveness. So I pick one issue. How do we reform the global governance institutions themselves to be inclusive, to reflect the voices and the ambitions of us in the global South? I give you one example. 40% of the critical minerals we need to push the global transition, energy transition, are in Africa. 40% or more. Give you some examples. In my neighborhood, we're sitting on at least 9 of the critical minerals between Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and Côte d'Ivoire. Guinea alone has the largest deposit and the purest deposit today of iron ore. But yet, our 3 countries in that neighborhood are amongst the 10 poorest. Is that equity? Is that inclusiveness? We're very pleased that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, together with UNIDO, have started a new initiative on responsible mining and inclusiveness. Because if the global energy transition is going to move forward, these minerals are key to battery systems, solar panels, and all kinds of smart grids with the minerals we have. But yes, we have to benefit. Some of our countries export billions of dollars of minerals, yet the value left back is 7% or 10%. Is that fair? Is that equitable? So how do we reform global institutions of trade, of finance, to change that architecture for the sake of peace and stability around the world? That's key. I hope that becomes part of our discussion on institutional reforms. Because yes, unfair trade is one of the most unfair and in fact divisive and depriving situation in our world. Our children want to be better, they want jobs, and the demands, as you heard from our presidents, are real. Number two, climate change. We are told now that every month of this year is the hottest. Every month. At least last month, they said last month was the hottest. We see what happens this month. It begs the question, we're going to COP29. Are we taking our commitment seriously? Or is it just a show? I was part of the global governance structure 20 years, central to it. Is this the right mechanism still? We already know the answer for COP29. We knew already the answer for COP28, the global stocktake. I say this because I was central in that system. We have to ask ourselves, are these commitments real? Because we in the developing countries, particularly in Africa, are paying the price. The extreme weather events are real. The devastation is real. And every study shows a 1 degree rise in temperature in the temperate areas, in the Sahel, is 1.5. How do we deal with this? Do we need different types of global governance structures to really address the real issues and, as the President said, follow our commitments? It's not only commitments in terms of financial flows, but it is commitments in being responsible citizens. Those who emit more must also change how they use energy and how they also emit in better ways. The third element I'll leave with you is looking south. The solutions are here. There are many solutions. Our colleague, the presenter, mentioned what is happening in China, what is happening in India, what is happening in countries like Malaysia, on food production, on innovation. 60% of the world's arable land is in Africa. We can feed all of you. But we need the partnerships, we need the investments, we need the infrastructure. And I am very pleased OPEC Fund identified innovations in infrastructure. We need to open up the space and build competitiveness of our economies. So yes, our economies can grow, there can be structural change. We can create the jobs for the youth. We need a minimum of 20,000 jobs every year in Africa. This is reality. I lived in Austria for a long time. I still live here, I have a home here, because I worked here for a long time. I say to my friends in Europe, don't close your borders on us. Our children don't necessarily want to come. We just want prosperity in the south. In the south, we're the nearest neighbor to Europe. The global architecture, the trade has to change. We want our children to come here as paying tourists, but it depends on the opportunities we all create together in the south. If our countries are just sources of extraction, of minerals, of wealth, then the world is not stable. By 2050, we'll be 2.2 billion. 2.2 billion. That's power, that's human resource. But yes, we want industrialization, we want competitiveness, we want growth. The relationship has to change. The relationship of one of mutual respect, mutual prosperity, prosperity for all, energy access, infrastructure, innovation is important for that. We want to thank OPEC Fund. We're partnering with OPEC Fund and a number of partners here, including the Arab Coordination Group. We thank you for what you did yesterday, focusing the spotlight on our unique situation in our country. We want to be partners. I give you one statistic. My country has the purest deposit of titanium in the world, the second largest. We've just discovered another huge deposit of lithium. Do we just ship it raw, or are we partners in the global transition for energy security and growth? Thank you very much.